How do the stories that we have and we hold influence the way that we live and be? And what happens when we loosen the grip that they have on us?
Yeah, look at that little irritant and how it turns into a pearl in the oyster.
Welcome to the Frequency Files. Thanks for joining us as we explore the vibrations, forms, and creations and mechanisms behind them that inform the nature of existence. Maya, it's awesome to have you back with us. Thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be back, actually. I'm looking forward to this chat.
Me too. Maya, you've shared profound insights from your life, from the vast array of places you've found yourself working, from animals to one on one clients to groups to airports. I'm so curious to know more about how this deep communion with energy and with story and with presence came about for you. How did this start? I know that it began as a child, but could you tell us a little bit more about, yeah, young Maya's journey and how
I
it
could
shaped
do my
your
best, Sarah. I could do my best. I think that, in chats that you and I have had previously, I've mentioned to you that it's always been there. And
Mm,
I think it's always been there for all of us. And there are perhaps events that take place or circumstances or conditions that take place that activate certain states of being or awareness in each one of us at different times in life. So let's make that the starting point.
absolutely.
Um, so that's number one. I would also say that I am known amongst my friends and family of having what one would call an elephant memory. I have strong recollections, memories, feelings from a very small age. Things that perhaps many psychologists and psychiatrists and researchers would say are not possible. It's not possible for a child pre-language to have a recognition or a recollection of an event that ... and yet I do.
Right.
And I therefore can only assume that it was not the child, the body on the bed, 6 months remembering, it's that which the larger part of me, the quantum aspect of me, taking note. So, and I would say that we all do that. We are multidimensional beings. We've had this discussion previously as well.
Mm,
Multidimensional beings, and we experience the world before we are individuated, i.e., before we're 7, in a particular way, and after we are 7, in another way, because at that point, we have already made decisions about life and what life is and how life works for us. Okay. So for me, these capacities of insight and foresight, perhaps intuition, perhaps precognition, started when I was very small. And one of the things that I was able to do was to sense the mood in the room, as we all do, but I bet, and would be able to take action to disrupt what was about to take place. Right. So I come from a home where there was some psychological and emotional chaos. And I learned very early on how to assess what was going on. And I learned how to assess because I discovered that I had the ability to do what we call in neurolinguistic programming a pattern interrupt. So wherever the energy and potential violence was rising, I had the capacity to dissipate that. So that was the beginning. And I would notice, even now to this day, it's a standing joke that if I go out, every dog in the street will find me, and every baby will pick up its arms like this in a supermarket you know, if I'm walking around with somebody and every baby goes, ah. So there's obviously something about my field that connects with animals and individuals whose fields are open. That connection takes place naturally, and therefore there's an exchange of information. Does
Mm.
that answer the question?
Yeah, yeah, it does. It's really interesting to read presence and I suppose remind all of us that that access to the field and to intelligence has always and is always there, and your recollection of that has enabled you to harness consciously those abilities, perceptions, and skills to integrate them into your daily life as you've gone about on this linear journey of being the personality of Maya.
And these activations, these points of activations, I had an accident when I got a big thwack on the head when I was about 4. That
Mm,
was right here. I have a scar in my eyebrow. And it knocked me out, and I was in my room on my own, and I was there for several hours before somebody came in and found me and took me to the hospital because my whole eyebrow was kind of hanging off my, yeah, it kind of, and I remember distinctly looking at my body from the ceiling on the floor. So that was my first consciously remembered out of body experience at 4. And I don't know what I learned from that, other than I recall my dad scooping me up off the floor, and I could feel the fear, his fear that something awful had happened to me, and his frustration taking me to one hospital and them telling him to take me to another. This would have been in 1965. And then getting it all stitched up and watching my you know, the fear and upset on other people's face. I was still out my body. I think that one of the biggest challenges in that was I think it took me several years to actually fully re-embody from that. So that made I'm just remembering,
mm.
literally, I'm remembering the session I did that actually reintegrated that part that was knocked out, or some aspect that stayed out. So I think for years I probably I really had one foot in each camp, and probably didn't understand that in my childhood.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And it makes sense why, as we've shared in chats that we've had previously, your occurring of reality in the world around you was so vastly different to your family of origin and other people in your community. So that would make sense.
Mm, mm.
What was that like for you as a young person, having a foot in both camps in a family of origin that maybe saw reality differently, and where you'd had that experience of being outside the body without any kind of mentoring or guidance on what that was, and then continuing of your own volition to develop and cultivate these skills and sensitivities as you moved beyond your childhood into your teens and adulthood.
Well, we probably had a conversation that I died when I was 9,
Mm,
um, and I had therefore a classic near-death experience that then progressed for 3 Earth days into an out-of-body experience. So that was from measles, and it was that was profound in itself. So that story of being out and being taken by these 2 guides, I have very distinct recollection of one being tall and thin and the other being short and fat. And we were on a magic carpet, and we were traveling through time. And I've heard a couple of people discuss this wave motion that they experienced when they were leaving their body. So for me, that translated into being on a wibbly wobbly magic carpet with these 2 guides moving through the waves of quantum space and landing in other iterations of life, having experiences of a minimum of 3 other full lifetimes in those 3 days. And I'm beginning to understand there were also snippets of other experiences that were not full lifetimes in those 3 days. So I got to experience myself as another person, as if, when one has strong dreams, perhaps we take on another identity. So imagine it like that I wake up and I am in the body of a Roman soldier. I wake up and I am a Shaolin monk in the high Himalayas, or a Tibetan monk in the high Himalayas. I wake up and I am in Greece and I'm a fully qualified herbalist, healing people. And fully living from being born, fast forward to being a teenager, fast forward to being an adult, and dying. So in that 3 days, I had an experience of my own death and several other of my lifetimes dying, and therefore the process of letting go and releasing myself into the universe became quite practiced. Okay, as did my ability to think myself into being, to experience myself in a different way. Anyway, from that experience, a few weeks later, I was introduced to somebody who was my cab driver, taking me backwards and forwards to school. Remember, I'm only 9 or 10. And he introduced me to the books that Lobsang Rampa wrote, which I'm just going to repeat that word, Lobsang Rampa, that name, and let people go off and explore on their own, and taught me to astral travel. So this is all before I'm 10. And astral travel, at that point, I don't know how other people did it. Subsequently, over the years, in my young adulthood and in my 20s, I had other people say, oh, I do this, and explain to me how they traveled. But for me, I was taught to tumble out of my chest, to tumble out of my heart chakra, okay, into another space or dimension. It's another story. We can have that discussion at another time. But again, what it taught me, what it showed me, was that there are other dimensions of reality. So that which we are in here is not the only place we can reside, and is not the only place where we can learn, I would say, wisdom and truth from. It's not the only place where we can experience our emotions. I will be honest with you and clear with you that sometimes in the astral things were pretty scary. And I met again that this mythology of life. So I had a fascination about Egyptian deities and the pyramids and the way and an Egyptian way of life, because I was meeting individuals that had that culture embedded in them in other dimensions, even past the OBE. Okay, so by the time I reached my teens, my interest was more, if you like, psycho-spiritual, and more. If somebody asked me when I was 11, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said psychiatrist. I was so interested in the working of the mind and the mind-body-spirit connection, even at that point, that I wasn't interested in being a doctor or a lawyer or a millionaire or whatever it was that other people around me were thinking. I was less interested in what I looked like and more interested in how I understood myself. But I will, and that was in direct contrast to my family of origin, as you would call it. They're very earthbound in their approach to life, and therefore there were massive conflicts in, not just in they didn't understand why I couldn't follow their rules, and they didn't understand why I would not see what they would see as common sense in their eyes. And in my eyes, I would look at them and think, you're mad. That's completely daft. So there was conflict, and I think it's at one point I would say that I looking back now, I would say that in their eyes I was probably quite feral. I remember my I mean, you know, from the perspective of out of control and not controllable, and would behave in ways that they would feel would be inappropriate. So I was it was a family of great secrets and hidden things, and I was a truth teller, and I would tell the truth and see the truth, and see through the pretenses and the lies, and found it very difficult and very uncomfortable to sit in that. Okay, and of course, I suppose without understanding the truth of all of that, but you know, people end up they in order to hide their guilt, pain, shame, fear, they tell stories. So I had a bunch of stories that would keep me safe, and they had a bunch of stories that would keep them safe, and they didn't meet, they didn't mesh.
Mm,
So
mm,
there was discordance and conflict.
mm. That's really, yeah, that must have been so challenging. It's,
I think personally, if I may just, I think that that's why I work with the outliers. I
yeah,
realize now that you know to that there is an issue with being made labeled as the black sheep.
yeah,
There is an issue of being the family scapegoat. There is what one then becomes an irritant to, I've just got a picture, so I'm gonna share this, an irritant to the family of origin. And what just came up for me was, yeah, look at that little irritant and how it turns into a pearl in the oyster. Yay. Yeah. I think that many people who walk around with stories of persecution in their mind, of being, my mum didn't do this, my dad didn't do that, nobody understood me, I was never enough for, these things that we put upon ourselves are very often what saves us from being trapped in a vibration that is not of us. I was saying this to a friend the other day, that you know that a particularly severe family shunning experience over a number of decades has allowed her to become who she is without the daily bullying and shaming that she would have experienced had she been in the family.
mm,
Um, and I know for myself that had I taken the route that my family would have expected of me, I probably, with my high level of sensitivities, would have had some form of major breakdown in my 30s or 40s, because who I was expected to be in that family unit and in that culture is so contrary with actually what my soul wishes to express in this world. So I would just give that to everybody and say, sometimes when you have been scapegoated, or you are the black sheep, one, you are being given permission to experience that life so that you can go and do something else consciously. And the other is, very often we come in as the light bearers for that family or that culture, and that cultural family just doesn't appreciate that. Do we say it that way politely?
yeah, yeah. And they're on their own expansion journey and they're here to do whatever they're here to do. And I love how you talk about the different ways that humans make sense of things through stories. And as you said, your family had certain stories about how things are or should be, or what reality is or isn't. And that was really polar opposite to your perceptions, views of possibility and what reality is. I also love, in conversations we've had before, the power of story or mythology in healing and the way that you use that. Can you tell us more about the role that storytelling has as a shamanic or healing tool?
You know, I would love to. I know that we're not on camera, so you can't see me grinning ear to ear on that. to answer that question. But let's start with story being the way that information is conveyed and remembered most thoroughly. And that pre-language, not so much pre-language, pre-writing, that oral tradition was very powerful for thousands of years before. That's the first thing. So it's innate.
Yes.
The capacity for story is innate. Our imagination are as vivid as we allow them to be. So let's put that to one side. Okay. Now, when I first worked with neurolinguistic programming, which is back way 1986, I trained, and I trained for 2 years. We worked with the processes. If people don't know what neurolinguistic programming is, it's fundamentally the study of excellence, how things work, how things don't work. And it is possible to break down an experience into the 5 senses using one's imagination. So what if let's say that I am angry and someone says I'm burning up with, that's a metaphor. That's a way of looking. So I'm as cold as ice. They're as cold as ice. When you talk about someone who you feel might be heartless, right? So when you understand that, you understand that we talk about an emotional state and take that emotional state and create it into something visual or something sensory. Okay, so once you understand that, you can understand how you can change the state that you're in, or change a perception, or change an experience by altering aspects and parts of it. Now, the brain does this naturally. So when we have a memory, when we think we're remembering something, we're very often just remembering the last time that we accessed it, which is when we change it, whether we realize it or not. So the thing that we are thinking about is never the pure event as it took place. The pure event is held in the emotional space. And very often our mind and our emotions, our brain will amplify the negative in order to have us fear and step back from that and not go there again. It will amplify that piece. So when somebody comes to me and they have an aspect of themselves that they say, I've got a block, I'm stuck, I'm this, that, and the other, what they're actually saying is, there's an aspect of me that is frozen in time, and it's going around in a loop. This is particularly addiction. I think when things like OCD, it's a loop that's unfinished. It's incomplete. There's not a thing. It can't stop. Okay. So, and we have a story about that. So someone will sit there and they'll tell me for 20 minutes why they have to wash their hands 25 times a day. Yeah. I've actually stayed with people and watched them every single time they prepare a meal. Fascinating. 4 or 5 times they'll wash their hands because they're so terrified of germs, because they were brought up in a household where somebody got cholera, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So we create these stories and these ideas. When you look at that story and you create new possibilities for a beginning, middle, and end of that story, I'm just smiling because this is such a simple way of talking about it. You alter the mind's capacity to hold the freeze. So there is a melting, a dissolving. And one of the processes that in my second book, actually, that I showed people was how we can record each level of a memory and turn it into, so my dad beat me up when I was 5. Okay, that's amazing. Thank you for that piece of information. And what did 5? Because immediately we take you and we don't say Sarah, we say 5. I say 5. So and how did 5 respond to that? Well, 5 felt small and weak and wanted to go and hide. And then I would say, and what does small and weak sound like? And there might be a squeak, ee. And I go, ah, and ee, and what happens when ee is making that noise? Well, I feel like I'm dying. And that's like what? And then you get this dialogue that just takes the pieces, the story, and I can map that. And then spontaneously, when we get to the crux of the story of this experience, two things can happen. One is that the body, the mind, the psyche, the intelligence offers a healing panacea. And somebody may say, oh, there's a red teapot. And I go, wow. And what's that red teapot like? Well, it's shiny and it's bright and it's full of hot tea and it's warm and it's fabulous. Ah, what happens when we take the teapot to E? Oh, E starts to sing a happy song. Fabulous. Seriously, this is just what happens. And you apply that individual healing panacea to each part of the story. And each part of the story changes until it's not recognizable to the brain, the amygdala, and therefore it dissolves. Another way that this works is that we bring one in advance. So we can create I think of something wonderful experience, and we can create a gestalt, a bringing together of a series of healing experiences that become a universal healing tool for that individual, which they can then take with them for the rest of their life, okay, and use on anything. And then we apply that to each stage of the story. So that's one form of therapeutic storytelling, by dissecting in a very simple conversational way and using the mind-body interface, mind-body-emotion interface, to alter the experience to the point where that experience is meaningless and has no emotional charge. That's one piece. There's another piece where I work with more ancestral DNA-based stories that show up, where and perhaps another lifetime or a parent's experience or a grandparent's experience is following the family line. And I will get a complete story of a Roman soldier who was caught in a nasty battle and got an arrow through the leg and was pinned to the ground, and somebody comes along and slits his throat, and the thoughts and things that he had when he was dying, and there's an incompletion there, right? So in those experiences, what generally happens is I get shown the whole experience, and then we go in and we start to talk. When I say we, I mean me and my teams, my invisible teams. We start to work on the mind, body, emotion, quantum connection of that story and how it's entangled through space and time. And I'm getting really dizzy talking about this. That's fascinating. And we untangle the ancestral connections and the DNA connections by exploring that story, retelling it, and giving it a different meaning and a different middle and a different end, and releasing the frozen trauma response through the genetic and ancestral history. So therefore we end up with a completely different story. And then the third aspect is almost a hypnotic storytelling, where I will ask you a couple of questions. We will access the issue through a different dimension or portal of your awareness through mind, body, spirit, or energy. And then the story takes over for itself. And I just tell the story, and the person flows through that. And at the end of it, it's different. It's completed and dissolved. So this is why I say to people that I don't do clearings and I don't heal. I'm not a healer. I support completions, because once these events take place in this way, we cannot go back to perceiving them and experiencing them as they were. So therefore it's done, finished. That was a long answer, but thank you for listening.
You know what? It's great because I wanted to talk to you about completion, and I love the language that you use around reorientating that and emphasizing that that is what's happening, because people do have different language, and making that emphasis on completion, I think, can be helpful for people also in depersonalizing things and letting something go, and whether it's something that's happened for us in this lifetime or we're clearing it from another plane of existence or at an ancestral level. I'm very curious to talk about the role that presence has in our expansion journey, in moving into deeper completion, moving into deeper spaciousness, and into becoming more of ourselves.
Firstly, what is presence? Let's touch into that for a moment. So presence is the capacity to be where we are without the noise of the past and the potential of the future interfering in that moment. And I would say that the majority of people in the Western world, at least, maybe the whole planet, rarely experience that sense of solitude and stillness and calm and bliss that comes from being in the space in between the busyness, in between the noise, in between the should have and ought to's. And yet that is the space in between the doing and not quite yet in the being, where presence takes hold, takes place. So that's the first little piece. Okay. Why is presence so important? Because presence is the only place in which change can take place thoroughly. Everything else, when we talk about the past and expect to, other people's language, heal the past, in the now, it's not possible. When we talk about who do you want to be in a year's time, 3 years' time, 4 years' time, that answer invariably comes from the discordance of the thing that we think that's the problem from the past that we're trying to get through.
Yeah.
Okay, so that thing that we're looking to create is still colored and driven by the thing that we are thinking is a problem or a limitation. Okay, in presence, which is what happens in storytelling, we are so entranced by the process, we are in the presence of it, in the present moment. So sometimes being present can just mean being deeply focused here and now in what we're doing, and other times it's a transcendent experience, depending on which piece we're talking about. So in presence, change happens in an instant. And that's why it's such a critical thing. There are different ways of reaching it. Heart math, for instance, will teach you brain-heart coherence.
Yeah.
And brain-heart coherence allows for that intelligent heart, which is so much more powerful than the intelligent brain, the intelligent mind, to process what is going on in absolute presence, because that coherence brings the body into presence. So it is that there are different ways of discussing it, experiencing it, being with it. But the main thing, I'll just repeat myself, is all change happens in presence, in that present moment now. Outside of that, it's not thorough, complete. So change happens and then there is completion from presence. So just, okay, Change can happen, shifts can happen outside of it, but they tend to go back to where they were. So we can stretch our parameters of the world, and we can learn how to manage ourselves, try and control ourselves, try and mitigate an experience, go back and breathe when we start to have a panic attack. But if we are in presence when we are addressing that thing, the Velcro of the past, okay, literally melts. And in that moment where there is nothing, where we've uncoupled that moment from the carriages of our past and watch them roll down the hill behind us, and before we're following the engine that's moving ahead of us, we can be in that space and reconfigure ourselves into our true nature. That's why presence is so important, and that's why I love it.
Couldn't agree more, Maya. And I love how having a present embodied experience can be a catalyst for people to then, as they shift into their next present moments, have very tangible evidence from their biochemistry, their outer reality, to want them to continue to cultivate that. Maya, before we wrap up today, do you have any other thoughts on how people can access greater capacities for change within themselves and within their lives?
That question sent a bolt of panic through my head for a second, and
Oh,
then it was interesting. So how do you answer that question? Oh my God. I would say that the first thing is to understand that you're not broken,
mm,
you're not damaged, you are a multidimensional, infinite being of love who is experiencing by choice this physical reality. We are honestly nothing more or less than a computer program running from a script that our soul has written for us to live. So when you understand that and you take the opportunity to discover stillness, again, presence, it's very important. When you stop being busy, when you give yourself time and space to just be, you can allow yourself to expand into possibility rather than be driven by the rules that have been set by others upon you and the rules that you have taken on and set for yourself. So the way that we can help ourselves is learning to breathe in a way that calms the nervous system. Okay, you're looking to create more self-love, more oxytocin in your own system than cortisol. So as we learn to separate from that fight and flight response in the body, and we allow for more space, we naturally become curious as to what is possible outside of the situation we've created for ourselves, knowingly or unknowingly. So that's one part. The other part is to understand this. Imagine in life that our brain is designed to filter the experiences that we don't like or were not pleasant. And it does that by, here we are, story again. Imagine that you are in a swimming pool with a big fat balloon. And all the experiences that you don't want to experience are in that big fat balloon. And all your energy is spent trying to squash that balloon under the water. Because this is how most of us live through life. This is why the body gets sick. This is why we experience psychosis. This is why we experience coping strategies and mechanisms that don't make sense to other people. Okay, because 90% of our energy is holding bloody thing down so we don't have to look at it. Okay? What happens when you give yourself a bit of room? It's like putting a tiny little pinprick right at the base of the balloon, right where the knot is. And you know how a balloon, when it begins to lose a little bit of air, it softens and it softens. So the more that we are willing to be still and breathe and acknowledge that there is stuff under there that we don't really want to look at and feel, but if it softens up a bit, perhaps we can look at it and we can feel it. And we may have a damn good cry for half a day, or feel a bit psychotic, or feel like we want to kill somebody. And we don't really. It's just the old feelings coming up. As that balloon loses its rigidity, so we have more energy to address what was in it, as opposed to trying to keep it down, right? So does that answer the question?
That is such a great analogy.
Good. Okay. Good.
Terrific analogy. Wow.
Glad
Yeah.
that was useful. Yes.
And so, such a beautiful way to wrap up in bringing the power of story to give a metaphorical answer that's so vivid and relatable for all of us, I think. Well, it was relatable for me. Uh, yeah. Thank you so much, Maya. I really appreciate sharing time with you and learning from you and listening to your, I don't know what the word is, boundless stories. If that's,
I actually want to ask you a question, Sarah, because we've had several conversations and
yeah.
you sessions. You've
Yes.
had sessions, so you've experienced this work directly, and
Yeah.
I'm interested, and I would like people to hear how
Mm.
that work has impacted you and how it's different to some of the other ways that you might have experienced of unsticking yourself.
Ooh. All right. It's a really fascinating fusion of using my own narratives, some narratives I didn't even know were there or were really mine. They may have been connected to me, but more in a constellation of souls that I'm journeying with, diving deeper into what it is that made those stories with their associated energetic charges stick and stay in my field, and how that's playing out. Because I think it's interesting, of course, we can show up with a certain theme we want to work on, but when in my experience of working with you, we do this very gentle detective work, I would say, in some ways, right?
Yeah, yeah.
To multidimensionally journey and loosen the grips, or as you said, melt the Velcro, then the relevance, the need, the hold dissipates and neutralizes. So I remember that really clearly in the first session that we were doing. Uh,
Yes, you said after you said that there was more spaciousness in your field, there was less interference and more room for you.
yeah, yeah, and there was a very tangible difference in the psychic space that was there.
I think what's interesting in you saying that is this whole concept of know the difference between yourself and everyone else is so foreign to most of us. We don't understand that we are 95, by the time we're 95% filled with other people's programs and other people's expectation of us.
Yeah.
And I think that in the process of clearing and completing the complexity of that clutter in your field and in
Yeah.
anyone's field, this is how I
Yeah.
start with everyone, we have the room to see the real Sarah and what the real Sarah requires to thrive fully. That's what
Absolutely.
you're describing. Mm,
Yes, yes, yes. And as you said, the all of these things that we acquire in our lives, it makes me think how, and I have this conversation with friends and with clients as well, of how unpersonal the stuff that we berate ourselves with having is. It's about neutralizing the hold that things that aren't even yours have had on your field that you don't prefer. And
that's it. That's it.
um
And
yeah,
there is a gentleness, isn't there? There is a gentleness in this process.
yes, yes, yes. I feel like there's an unraveling that's happening, you know? And maybe we can have a conversation about it in like 6 months and tune
Absolutely.
into that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because a
And
lot,
that unraveling and expansion is quite normal. And
yeah,
it should, because from when you think about a trajectory, right? You know, when
yeah,
there's a saying about direction, you know, that if a plane is 1 degree off target, then you end up in a completely different place. And
yes,
that unraveling,
yes,
you know, so here we are in life. I think people don't even understand how even small changes in their approach to life can have massive impact moving forward. And people sometimes go into they want to shift and change something and they think it hasn't changed, but some of it has loosened enough for that expansion to have the trajectory take them where they want to go. And sometimes it's instant, and sometimes it takes months or years. So
mm,
expansion um, is a natural consequence of being present and doing the work. We are what is in our own way.
oh yeah,
We don't realize that that is a truth,
yeah.
and
It's a very
people often
inconvenient truth. That's
very
just,
inconvenient.
yeah,
I have had people say to me when I say, well, you know, what's the problem? And they go, me.
yeah,
And but that saying me isn't necessarily helpful to an individual, because that getting in our own way is how the brain, the mind, keeps us safe in our physical body, in our physical world. And
yeah,
our inspiration and imagination and ambition is often driven by a higher energy.
yes,
And
yeah,
therefore, there is a conflict,
yes,
a discordance between that which we wish to achieve, do, share, be, serve, and that which wants to keep us safe, keep our
hey,
heads down, stop us having our heads chopped off and being tortured as we were in another lifetime for standing up, particularly as women in a very masculine world. And when we take the opportunity to resolve some of that frozen trauma and belief that travels through time, we create for ourselves a space in which new opportunity can land.
yeah, yeah,
And that's kind of what you're talking about.
yes, 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 we are. Yeah, because we're a different self. We're a different
That's
self.
a
Yeah,
different self on a different trajectory with a different vibration, a different sound, different, the baseline has a different intention.
yeah, yeah,
And that if when that intention resonates more strongly with your soul path, never mind purpose, that's something else altogether. When it resonates with your soul path, the self-imposed safety mechanisms that we put on the road have disappeared before we reach them. So we're dissolving our own obstacles before we would have reached them in the first place.
Mm, that's such a good way of putting it.
What's the difference?
Oh,
If
the
you could notice a
difference.
difference between how other people
Ooh.
approach completion and how I approach completion, would you be able to articulate that?
Ooh. Okay, that's a great question. The multidimensional use of storytelling, whether that's from what you're detecting in the field and or what the person is accessing within them that they didn't know was there. And in using the therapeutic storytelling tool with a multidimensional vantage point, there's some kind of safety and emotional, distance isn't the right word, space to be able to unravel threads. And it's like multiple threads. And some of those stories weave into other stories, or some of it's like I think I said before, like being a detective and going through the threads, um, and then neutralizing them by letting them have the airtime that they need without uh, judgment or without a right, wrong, good, bad, polarized vantage point that can then help to soften and bring them into that neutrality where there's no hold and therefore
Mm,
no relevance for them to
I understand.
remain.
That's very well said. And I would say that that's another advantage of presence is neutrality, and
Mm,
that in within that neutrality all possibility exists. And that is what is it's another key component of deep change and deep completion,
yeah.
is that one is neutralizing that which grips us in the story and enters into a new possibility for how that plays out, and to therefore choose and create what we prefer.
Mm,
Awesome.
mm.
Fabulous. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you very much. And I really enjoy working with you in this way. Lovely.
Thanks. Thanks, Maya. Likewise. Really appreciate your time and wisdom.